turn our attention to football, and it matters in Germany in the Bundesliga, because it was a fascinating finish to the Bundesliga season at the weekend. Borussia Dortmund, as we said earlier, gifting Bayern an 11th straight Bundesliga title. Dortmund drawing at home 2-2 to Mainz. That allowed Bayern to win the title. They won 2-1 at home to Cologne, and goal difference was the difference in the end. Football analyst Jasmine Baba joins us on the show this morning. Jasmine, how are things? Good morning.
All good. A bit tiring after a very busy weekend, but I think everyone's feeling the burn of the end of the season right now. So yeah, very busy in Germany.
It was crazy. So maybe for people who haven't seen this, Jasmine, what happened?
Well, Dortmund went quite early down at home to Mainz, where they only needed to win. I think the pressure of all of the country, apart from Bayern fans and obviously their rivals, Schalke fans, wanting them to win, I think broke them somewhat. So yeah, they went 2-0 down, and in the adjacent game in Bayern Munich, they went 1-0 up quite early. So it looked like it was all going to be fine for Bayern Munich from that time. However, Cohen, who was playing against Bayern, had a penalty to make it 1-1. All of a sudden, Dortmund were back in the driving seat. Dortmund did manage to turn it around in the second half and to make it 2-2. But in the 89th minute, Bayern Munich took the lead through Jamal Musiala to snatch the title away. So very dramatic last day. We don't usually get this on the last day, especially in terms of title challenge, but this weekend we had the championship, the top four, and relegation to play for on the final day. So it was a very exciting time, especially when it was won by Bayern Munich that late.
Jasmine, I think I'm right in saying this, when Bayern lost to Leipzig on the 20th, which is Saturday beforehand, they were 1-0 up, conceded 3 goals. Fans were leaving. They were literally leaving the ground. Definitely a 3-1, possibly a 2-1. And whether I've seen this being described as indifference about just, it didn't matter that if they won it or not again, because they're just so used to it, or maybe they'd given up. So how did this happen?
I think there is a theory to be had that some of the players that are so used to winning the league, they don't know how to put up a challenge anymore, and they're not experienced in actually challenging things, and that's why it looks so. Sometimes when they're really, really pushed, they don't know how to get over it, and I think the kind of inconsistency of changing manager throughout makes it even harder to work with. But I think this has been brewing. I don't think this is suddenly a surprise that Bayern Munich are just looking a bit more shaky than they have done. They have had, and this is basically why their CEO Oliver Kahn and sporting director Hasan Salihamidzic were fired just before the final match day. These struggles have come from kind of decisions in recruitment. If we think about Frank Ribery being replaced with the likes of Serge Gnabry and Leroy Sané, they've gone for, if you go through their recruitment process, they've gone for more young talent and hope rather than experienced winners, and that they have to always put this kind of progression in their players rather than having something that's there. And then there's the other side of it, that they haven't replaced some players at all. They haven't really replaced Thiago. They hadn't replaced Lewandowski in the same kind of profile types. So it's no wonder that they're struggling, and failure to fix this, which it looks like they're trying to make amends for with those 2 firings higher up, failure to do so, that we might actually see a different title winner next year.
What was the celebration like in Munich? Was it kind of like, oh yeah, we won actually, did we? It just doesn't feel the same.
I would say that the celebration this year was a lot more hyped than the celebration last year. Right. Last year, because I think they kind of walked over it, and you have to remember Dortmund had both Bellingham and Erling Haaland and didn't really give them any competition. So it kind of seemed bored from the players last season. This season, I think because it was so late, because they had to fight, the celebration was a lot more energetic. But I think as most super clubs go, especially when you hold that kind of dominance, especially in the parties and the street parties, it does tend to be a little bit more diluted than if Dortmund would have won.
Just last one, in this. So Terzic, right? If he was involved, I think, in helping Bilic for Ireland Croatia back in 2012. Then he was involved with Bilic, obviously. Subsequently, how big a blow is this? Because like this could be your career-defining sort of bottle of job.
Yes and no. I think the personality of Terzic and some of the kind of his tactical measures. I think the big test of him this year has been tactical. Everyone knows that he has the emotion. He kind of connects with Dortmund fans a lot more than some of the other coaches in the last few years. He has that emotion. And I think because he's won silverware with this Dortmund side the season before last, it won't be such a stain on his career. I think people have to remember the first half of the season, they were 6th or 5th with 9 points behind Bayern. They had to make that up, and they did, and they pushed really hard. You do not become a title winner with the first half of the season they had. The fact that they got close is really, really surprising, and that takes a hell of a job to do. So I don't think it's going to be a huge stain on his career. I do think they'll be in a better place next season. I do also think it would be terrible if they try and change manager once again. I think they've got a really good foundation in place now, which they haven't had for a while. I would say since Tuchel, but Tuchel and the board really didn't get along, as we've heard so many times. So I think they were strongest since Tuchel now, and they have a really good foundation to build on with Edin Terzic.
They were quite inconsistent as well in early parts of the season, Jasmine, and it felt like maybe that World Cup break was a bit of a turning point for Terzic.
Absolutely. Again, it wasn't only the kind of change of philosophy that they had to do in the first half of the season. There was quite a bit of upheaval with Erling Haaland leaving. You had Sebastian Haller. You had obviously Adeyemi, and Marlon was already there, but really had to go into a new role. They all basically had to get into a new role. We had Niklas Süle come in. So there was quite a big upheaval through club and philosophy at that time, which led to these inconsistencies. And then to make it worse, Sebastian Haller, someone that they were going to rely on, obviously quite tragically had that cancer diagnosis that ruled him out for most of the season until the winter break and just after the winter break. So yeah, that winter break gave them quite a lot. It gave them time to actually drill in Edin Terzic's philosophy. And I mean, the run that they went on afterwards was just insane. So a little bit of time, a little bit of upheaval. I mean, we might see another upheaval again, but I don't think, hopefully it won't be that severe with, because it does look like Bellingham is leaving. And Guerrero too. So I think most of that team is quite solid enough. They just need that one kind of number 8 replacement to challenge once again.
Bellingham, you mentioned there, had been struggling with an injury. I think he only came on at the weekend against Mainz in that game. I presume now that his leaving and probably to Real Madrid is inevitable. There's no chance of him staying.
And yeah, I don't believe so. So what happened over the weekend is just quite a few hints that he's leaving. So I don't personally read into these things. I like to read into it when it's actually announced, because you don't know what's going to happen. But there's a report of him being the last one to leave the ground on the weekend. Apparently he had a meeting with the board, so Kim Vatska, and Sebastian Kehl, who's sporting director, with his family. So he apparently gave farewell gifts for everyone and was going around the stadium with his family, which reporters over here think these are telltale signs that someone is leaving. So there's reports that the deal with Real Madrid will be finalized in the next few days as well. So I would say he's gone.
He earned the Player of the Season award as well, deservedly.
I mean, yes and no. I think it's always hard to single out an individual award for a team sport. It doesn't sit right with me.
You're not a fan of these awards?
No. I think things that you can count, so top scorer obviously makes sense because you have a quantifiable amount of things to say that you're better than someone else in that league. But in terms of Player of the Year, you can base it on so many things. I think he's one of the best players in the league. That's certain. I mean, his presence was missed on the final day. If he played, would Dortmund win the title? Probably, but he has also been inconsistent at times too. So I can't say deservedly, but he is one of the best. I find it weird when normally players of the season are given to the title winning team. So I would also have to say Jamal Musiala has had a fantastic season and literally won the title for Bayern Munich. And you can choose a best player from several teams. I mean, I'm not saying Jude Bellingham doesn't deserve it though, because I know many people will get mad if I say that, and I'm not saying that at all. I just can't quantify what an individual award for Player of the Season means for each player, for each league. Yeah.
And Musiala got the 89th minute winner as well to secure that title for Bayern as well at the weekend. It struck me as well, Jasmine, that Bayern lead the table 4 times during the season, and each time that they take the lead, they drop points. Does that say something about their, I don't want to say, well, I'm going to say it, inferiority complex almost to Bayern Munich, that every time they get to the top of the table, they drop points, they bottle it essentially?
Oh, you can read it into so many things. You could try and, I wouldn't like to say it's bottle or it's mentality. I think those things, and I've not really checked at what point they've switched over or which games that they've had when they've dropped points, because you don't know who's had the harder run in at that certain point. Did they face a harder team at the point Bayern had faced an easier team? All of those things. And if most of those changes took place in the second half of the season, where Dortmund were on this incredible run anyway. So it's hard to say if someone slips up. Is it a bottle job, or is it just the how the fixtures are laid? What are the injuries like? All of these things. And then we've obviously had that really dramatic coaching change of Bayern, which made everything else inconsistent too. So I don't like to put it all to mentality. I think that's quite unfair. One thing I will say about how emotional it can be at times is the single Dortmund Mainz game. There were pieces of that game where it did look like Dortmund were over sloppy. So especially in defence with their second goal, and sometimes it's just unluckiness as well. No, sorry, I'm going to stick with sloppiness because Haller's penalty. I was going to say unlucky, and then I replayed it in my head. It was not the greatest penalty. Now, is that due to a penalty taker situation? Because I wouldn't have technically thought Haller would have taken that penalty. I think it's moments of sloppiness, but I think that's just what happens sometimes, and it just came at the wrong time for Dortmund.
What's the kind of vibe in German football at the moment, Jasmine? And the Union Berlin season was mad, and there's so much to admire still in Germany about the club structures compared to, petrol states effectively being allowed to take over in England.
Yeah, and that's been a burning discussion in Germany as well, because we've recently had a vote across the first two leagues, which are both under the DFL, if they want to have an investor for the league. So they voted against that, but it was only 2/3 of the vote that you had to pass for it to be accepted, and they didn't reach that margin. So this has been a burning debate, and there's been lots of discussion. Fans don't want a league investor. So even at a league level, to maybe free up having an investor at club level is also a conversation going on here. But yeah, I would say the clubs are mostly better run. I mean, we do still have investor types in some manner of the ways. You just have to look on the other side of Berlin at Hertha, who got relegated a few weeks ago, how their investors basically wanted to sell up the shares, have a new investor, and they just don't have the money, and now are facing quite a few problems with the licensing for next season. So yeah, they're mostly better run, but we're not perfect either, and we can't put the same kind of money as Premier League clubs do, and that's why we are seen as weaker. But many people in Germany, I mean, a lot of people in Germany do find it boring that Bayern Munich always win the title. However, there is still a sense of, well, if it's not my team winning, I don't really care who wins. Yeah. So you've got both of that. It can be quite boring to look outside of it, but you have so many other storylines that people watch the German Bundesliga and the Zweite Bundesliga, which is the second tier. It's about the culture. It's about the fan groups. It's about being with your own sets of fans and treating it more like a day out than whoever wins. And then you've always got relegation and Europe spots are always fought over every season. So the attitude was quite sad that someone else didn't win, but I think it's quite superficial to an extent.
A little bit of indifference there, no doubt. Finally, and very briefly, Jasmine, Brighton, we kind of keep a heavy eye on Brighton on these shores at the moment, given Evan Ferguson's involvement, but they've signed Mahmoud Dahoud, a couple of German caps to his name, free transfer from Borussia Dortmund. Of course, they'll have Caicedo and McAllister heading out the other direction, Brighton, and lots of games in the Europa League to look forward to next season, so need for a big squad. What sort of player are Brighton getting?
You're getting a fantastic player. They're getting a fantastic player, and he's a more deep-lying playmaker. So he's best in just sitting in front of the back line. He's very technically gifted. He creates really good passing options for different players. Really good sense of where to position himself. So he's rarely caught lacking on the pitch, and he's clever in terms of when to press a player, which has become increasingly important in the Premier League. He suits a more possession dominant team, so Brighton should be quite good for him. The only things that has kind of had a few warning signs over him is that his injury record, he does tend to get injured and sometimes is not the strongest physically, so he can get beat and pushed around a little more often than not. But I really like Mo Dahoud. I think he was one of their stronger pivot players in the last 2 seasons, despite his injuries. And he's got a lovely mid-range shot to him. So if you just have him outside the area, I really hope he has a crack at goal, because he has scored some really fantastic goals over the years.
Brilliant. Look forward to seeing him in the Premier League in action next season with Brighton. Jasmine, great stuff as always. Thanks a million.
Great, thank you.
Brilliant. Jasmine Baba, the football analyst there, at 49.